not. So, all right. I prefer to stand next to the stand here, so you can see my legs. All right, I'm going to present a new compression system, which is sort of like a hybrid system as well. My name is Josefin Damm, and unlike most other presenters here, I don't have a medical background. My background is within smart and technical textiles. So, and I'm merely the co-founder and co-inventor of this product that I'm going to show you today. But what about bandaging and the history of bandaging? Well, even the ancient Greeks used bandages, but actually it goes even longer back in time. So this painting here is several thousand years old, where they used compression. So you would think that, well, bandaging today then would be perfect, right? We would have evolved the techniques and refined the devices as well. So let's have a look how it looks today. Oh, that doesn't look very nice. What about this one? No, not very nice after several thousand years. And I'm sure the ones that works within medical practice have probably seen these cases before. So we know that, what about if you apply compression? You know that if you apply too low compression, you don't really have an effect of the compression. So you don't reduce edema, or you don't improve the ejection fraction and venous return. But if you apply too high compression, you can cause some serious damage to skin and tissue. So somewhere there is an optimum of the compression dosage, but where on this curve is it? So that must be possible to find out. And what about the treatment? As Professor Pratt, I like to refer to this picture here from a study by Prutz et al. From 2014. It's very clear that even if you're trained medical staff, it's really difficult to apply a predefined target pressure, and less than 10% here of the 551 participating healthcare personnel reach the target pressure. Also, if you look at the variation between the minimum and maximum, you can see that the minimum values, they're hardly efficient at all, and the maximum are dangerously high. So basically, I would compare compression treatment today with this syringe here. And would that be accepted, giving insulin or morphine to a patient just by, well, guessing how much to give the patient? Wouldn't it be much better to have compression treatment looking like this instead, where you actually have a dosage, a quantified treatment? So that's what I'm going to present here. It's a sort of a hybrid system, as I said. We have the first product, which is a new smart elastic bandage that gives a well-defined pressure. And the second component is a stiff product made of Velcro. So first we start to give a precise pressure. And the bandage here gives a well-defined pressure invariant of the applier, but also invariant of the shape and size of the leg. So it doesn't matter if you have really strange forms, because as Dr. Susan Nørgaard from Denmark said before, hardly any patients have normal shaped legs, right? So we don't know what you get in the treatment room. The material is elastic and conformable, so you will have no pressure change during movement or after edema reduction, because the material adapts to the changes in circumference. For this specific system, we have chosen a safe and low pressure, 20 millimeters of mercury. Thank you, Dr. Printing. But it is also possible to design different pressure levels with this material that we have. So what about pressure? What is pressure? Well, pressure is a product of the force, meaning how much you stretch the bandage. The more you stretch it, the higher the pressure. Times the overlap, or the amount of layers. The more layers, also the higher the pressure gets. Times the curvature. And the curvature is really tricky to determine, because it looks different between different patients and also different along the leg, right? So all of these things need to be considered. You can also show it like this. If you use a constant force on a really sharp curvature, like the ankle, for example, the pressure gets really high. If you use the same force where there's less curvature, for example, the calf, the pressure gets less. And less curvature, like the thigh, is even lower pressure. So you need to consider the differences in curvature and then adjust the force when you apply the bandage. So what we have here is a unique material where we have guidelines. So you've got a longitudinal one to get a consistent overlap so that we know that we have exactly 50% overlap for each turn, but we also have transverse markings. Determine the amount of material for each turn. So as you see in the picture or on my leg here, the shorter lines are going to be aligned along the leg, right? This means that I need to stretch more on the thicker parts of the leg, like the calf. However, as you remember from the slide before, the calf is much flatter than the ankle. The ankle is much sharper curvature. So on the flatter curvature, I need to increase the force in order to get a constant pressure all along the leg. And that's how this unique material works. So it doesn't work with any elastic material. You need really specific elastic properties. So the first study was published last year by Lundatex et al. On this study, where 21 nurses participated. They all had different working experiences. So some of them do work with bandages every day, but some of them work with brain or hand surgery and never uses bandages, even not on the legs. And it was also the first time they used a bandage. So they did one test application and then 3 consecutive measurements were done. And the predetermined pressure for the bandage was 50 millimeters of mercury. And the results from the study shows that we get, for each 9 to 5 confidence interval, independent of state and position, we get at most 5 millimeters of mercury from the target pressure. So, remember this study again from WUWHS et al., showing this variance for all the 500 participating personnel, with less than 10% reaching the target pressure, and compare that to the Lundatex study, where all the participating nurses managed to reach the target pressure invariant of their experience. So I think that's a huge achievement. So also, I think Dr. Caprini showed you a lot of slides on the dynamic measurement. So if you look at this, you can see that there is very little stiffness. So it gives a very well-defined pressure invariant of the position, right? Because the material is elastic, so it adapts to the changes also when you stand up. So, meaning that the stiffness is very low. However, you also heard from before from Professor Pats that in order to increase the venous return, you need a stiff material. So how do we make this elastic material stiff? Well, it's quite common to just add a stiff bandage material. That's how the multi-component bandage systems works today. But it's really difficult to apply a stiff material without increasing the resting pressure. So it's really easy to apply, first of all, a large variance between different products and on different legs, but also can be really quite high and uncomfortable and not very safe resting pressures. So with this material we can define the safe resting pressure, and also here if you look at the stiffness for various products, there's a large variance also between the stiffness. So there's really no consistency. So what we have is a novel method and also a novel material to apply a stiffness without changing the resting pressure. So we have some patches of Velcro looking like this. That you cover the leg with them. And you do that in the resting position, meaning that you don't add any force so you don't add any pressure. So the resting pressure is still 20, and the patches together, they create a rigid and stiff shell on the bandage, around the bandage. So this means that at working or standing position, you get a dramatic increase in the pressure. So only when it's needed. It also allows easy, safe maintenance over time of the pressure. So you can see, the front patch is a bit different. It's a long patch instead of this small one, which you will see in the workshop. So it's easy to open that up, and you do that every morning. I will show you more about that. So now look at this dynamic measurement curve. So you see the bandage pressure together with the patches is still close to 20 in the resting position. However, when you move or when you stand up, the pressure gets really high. So you get this pumping effect on the muscle. And also, I think this was described by Dr. Caprini, that a lot of stiff products lose their effect quite soon after the application, because they do have a positive effect, but that causes also a reduction of edema, and if you have a stiff material, the material can't adapt to the changes in circumference. And another study by Protz et al., their conclusion was that the currently available compression systems are not fit to keep the required pressure, and optimized products need to be developed. So this is the way our system works here. So just by opening up the front patch, use your hands and the elastic material underneath will adapt to the new changes in circumference, and then you close it again. And if you do that each morning, you can maintain the pressure level over time. And this can be done by the patient or by a relative, so there's no need for healthcare personnel, or you can have staff that is not so well trained. So if you look at this pilot study here for pressure measurements over 7 days, you can see that due to edema reduction in the evening, day 1, there is a quite dramatic drop in pressure. However, when the maintenance of pressure, the opening and closing of the front patch have been done every morning, the pressure day 7 is basically the same as day 1. So the conclusion is that this product keeps the resting pressure at a safe and also comfortable level, so that could be suitable for example, patients with mixed ulcers or diabetes. It also increases the working and standing pressure only by adding the stiffness. And it also allows easy self-maintenance over time. And I could say also that the bandage is a single-use product, and the patches is washable. So you can buy a start kit, and then you have single-use bandages that you can change each week and then reuse the Velcro products. And I'd like to thank you for your attention with this picture here from a hospital in Sweden, Skövde. They're performing a feasibility study at the moment for us. Thank you very much. I hope so.
Anyway, we are finished, and we now to